Hi everybody, today I want to share a card that I made using the new stamp set C1868 Floral Details and Backgrounds. So what I've done is it's a very large stamp, so I've put it on my big 5x6 block. You just saw me there conditioning this stamp so that it is in good shape because it's brand new. And I'm actually going to emboss with this today. So I am inking it up with Versamark and making sure that I have really good coverage because it is a very big stamp. And then I'm going to place it on the corner of my paper here. I made sure that I had enough of a border around it so that I could trim it up real nice and square. And now I'm just pouring on my gold embossing powder on there. So I also wiped down my paper with my anti-static pouch, and that stops the Versamark, or sorry, that stops the powder from sticking where it shouldn't. So it worked quite well. And now I'm just going to warm up my heat tool, and then I'm starting to heat emboss and melt the embossing powder. So I found with the embossing powder, especially on the large areas, you can see it starting to change color here as it melts. But what I find is in some of the areas that might be a little bit larger, if you heat it a little bit longer, it will give you a smoother finish. Sometimes it gets a little bit grainy. And so if you heat it a little bit longer, it just allows it to melt a little bit more. So I'm just making sure that I go over and get all of the areas done. A couple of spots I didn't quite heat long enough, so I've gone back to make sure that I've gotten everything covered up nicely. Now I've gone ahead and I've cut all the pieces that I needed for my card, and I'm just going to start adhering it. So I decided that I didn't want to see the white card base, so I cut a piece of purple to match the size, and I'm placing it down. Then I've taken a piece of my gold foil paper and I cut it out so that's just a little bit bigger than my stamped image. And as you can see, I cut out my sentiment from the center because you're not going to see it, so why waste all of that gold paper? So it's a great way to make sure you're getting the most out of that expensive paper. So now I'm just centering my stamped image, and you notice that I'm not using any foam tape or anything. It is nice to add, but when I put these in the mail, I just prefer them to be not too thick. So I'm adding some gold embellishing thread as well. I just taped it with Scotch tape on the back, wrapped it around a few times, and then I'm adding the Scotch tape to hold it. And so then I'm just going to attach this to the card as well. As I said, I'm just going to attach it flat, and it sits very nicely on top of there with very little dimension, but just a tiny bit because you have the layers. Now I'm just going to add my sentiment on here, but I do want a tiny bit of dimension on here. So I am going to add little foam squares that I have. They're very thin, and so I'm just going to put them on the back, and that gives me just enough dimension to pop that up to give it a little bit of a shadow. Now I'm taking the little piece of embellishment thread that I had left over there, and I'm going to attach it to one of these gold gems. And so I'm just kind of fiddling around with that because it's finicky and I couldn't grab onto the thread very well. But all I did was I just kind of wrapped it around a few times and stuck it to the back of the gem. Because the thread is so thin and tiny, it's only a few wraps around, so it's stuck there just nicely. And then I'm just grabbing my piercing tool because it's the easiest thing really, and I flip it over and I just use it to position and then attach my gem there with the embellishing thread, and I'm all done.